Diffusion studies to be up to date because every 2 years a PhD candidate in the US, Canada, or the United Kingdom draws the short straw and has to redo diffusion studies. So they are, every 2 years, we do them again. By now, you know, they've got down to the sub X under each of these, but that's scholarship for you. The 5 points remain the same. Decision-making begins with awareness. You can't make a decision about something you don't know you ought to be thinking about or making a decision about. So again, that's why I say run those columns, get good media coverage if you can, because who cares? If you reach 6 people and make them aware, that's 6 people who are in the diffusion process. When people become aware, they don't care how they become aware. They'll take this word of mouth, they'll take it on the back of an old envelope. Doesn't have to be snazzy stuff. It's just that it's now penetrated their perceptual system. If you become aware and it seems relevant, and of course that's the problem today with over-communication. A lot of stuff comes along and we just can't handle it, so it ends right here. But if some people say, wow, that's really important to me, they move into a phase called interest. And in that phase, that's just what they're doing. They're satisfying their interest in the subject. Is this really important to me? Should I really be thinking about this? But here's the bad news. After that, information and communication cease to have an important role in decision making. One of the great problems of organizations is that we go this far and nobody seems to be acting out the behaviors yet. So we go back to 1 and we hit them again harder. And we just keep people chasing their tail around steps 1 and 2. What it takes to make a decision is that after you've collected the information that you think you need to satisfy your interest, and obviously that's much less today than it used to be. Most of you can probably remember when an important purchase like a car or a house, my God, you did a scientific study before you bought that. Today we gather a couple of facts and boom, away we go. Because again, everything is foreshortened in terms of time. But after we've got that, we go off into the closet in a phase called evaluation. Good old human nature steps in, and we simply say, do I really care about this? If I buy that car, you know, what will my mother-in-law think if I come home with this sexy convertible with the wire wheels and the squirrel's tail on the aerial? I mean, God, what kind of trouble will I get into with this? You know, the real-world questions come home. If the idea survives that self-evaluation process, then we put the idea up to social trial. Social trial. And notice that word social. What that means is we don't make decisions by ourselves. In fact, on 98% of the subjects on which we are asked to make decisions, 96% of the subjects on which we are asked to make decisions, 98% of us don't do much of anything without checking it out with somebody else. Now, when I say that, it usually bothers a lot of people. They say, what do you mean? I make up my own mind. I think for myself. I'm independent. Well, if you want to prove to yourself that it ain't true, next time you go out to eat with somebody and the menus are passed around, just notice the first words out of somebody's mouth. What do you do? Of course, we can't even order a lunch without checking it out with the group. Now, that's not a negative. As a matter of fact, that's a very strong positive. Because remember, above all else, humans are social animals. We go along to get along. Keeping us cohesive is more important than other things. It doesn't mean we don't split up, but I mean, we do have a strong desire right in here to keep us cohesive. And if you want to know how strong that desire is, and why things like the internet and email and all that are not going to be major changes in human life, they've merely sped up the time cycle again, maybe gotten us more information available, a hell of a lot more than we want, and a heck of a lot less trustworthy. I love these people who say, you know, I didn't like it when I had to read those brochures, but boy, I really trust that stuff I see on the web. I say, you idiot. The same guy that wrote the brochure put the stuff up on the web. But the reason that this is true and is not going to change, don't believe the hype from the high-tech industry, is if you just think about the history of our species. You know, the physical anthropologists in East Africa, in the old Dubai Gorge there, who are discovering the oldest fossil remains, they now say that a humanoid, a human-like creature, has been on Earth for at least 5 million years. They also know that our present form, now, you know, the one we're now in, called Homo sapiens sapiens. Homo sapiens sapiens has been around for at least 2 million years. Now, how? Think back now of what you know about these prehistoric times. How did we manage to survive? Think of all the predators that were out there. Just think of one. Think of the saber-toothed tiger. You know, this guy was about 10 feet long and 8 feet high, and you've seen those pictures of those big teeth coming out, and all those other teeth behind those big ones. Those were just to hold, you know, while they took a big bite. Well, I mean, now think of them running around out there. Herds of them running around. And then look at us. We're not very fast. We have no big teeth. We have no claws. I mean, you know, how did we survive? That's the genius. We knew how to form teams, groups, and capture and kill the saber-toothed tiger. And here we are now. What is there? 5 billion of us on the Earth, and aside from a few folks in Baltimore, have you seen any saber-teeth lately? they're not out there. Well, not him. He's one of us. He's okay. He just happens to be assigned to Baltimore. He can't help it. We'll send him out in the territory next year. Don't worry about it. But I think you get the point. Yeah. In other words, if for 5 million or at least 2 million years, right here in our atavistic system, in our gut, is this idea that we work together. Do you see why nothing is likely to change this, and why this is how we make decisions? When I used to have time, I taught in graduate school. I just haven't had time for the last 20 years, but when I did, I used to prove this to my graduate students who would always be, oh, that's not true, we make up our own minds. I would take them over to a little candy store near Boston University where I taught, and take them over there about 3 o'clock in the afternoon when kids were coming out of school. And the kids would come into the candy store to buy a candy bar on the way home, and it never failed. 2 little boys in there buying candy, they're looking at the bars, and they're looking back and forth at each other. Finally, one of them inevitably says, are you having a Nestle or a Hershey? I mean, it just never failed. If the other one said, oh, I feel like a Nestle today, bingo, 2 Nestles out the door. Here we go. See, that's it. Because that's how we function. And if social trial says what you were thinking of doing is a good idea, chances are you adopt that idea, and you do it. You make that decision. If social trial says, what? You're going to do what? Your spouse, your significant other, or both, or, you know, some other folks that you trust are saying, no, don't do it. Chances are you reject the idea. Now, some people don't reject the idea, and that's what keeps the psychiatric industry going. Now, wait. I mean, it's funny, but it's also true. Why do people have mental health problems? Because they're doing what society or their society doesn't approve of. Pretty soon, you know, they're feeling a little paranoid about it, and then pretty soon they're totally kooky, and then it's off the booty hatch. See, because we are also a demanding species that people either conform or that they attack conformity in an acceptable, polite, tactful way. And people who don't do that literally end up often with mental health problems. And so that's how people make decisions. Now, that did not answer all the questions. When Katz published his study, people said, well, that's fine, but I mean, does everybody follow this? And the research said, yep, but everybody doesn't follow it at the same speed. And so, back to the research, and we now have a list of the speeds with which people adopt new ideas. Now, please understand, this is not stereotyping people as fast or slow adopters. This is subject by subject by subject. So someone who's very slow to catch on to the details of Social Security may be an expert about the Federal Reserve System or about buying a car. So this is definitely subject by subject, but there are again 5 groups. The first groups we can ignore. They are known as innovators. And the reason you can ignore them is because they're so far ahead of everybody else that only a small group pays any attention to them. They're usually considered off the wall, and they flit around. They have to adopt new ideas all the time. They have to be progressive. So it's not worth trying to work with them in a public affairs sense, because by the time you get their attention, they're flitting on to some other idea. But what they do is important. They try out new ideas. This is 2% of the people, and they don't give a fig for public opinion. In other words, this down here does not apply to them. They don't care if they take a stupid position or if it's a very unpopular, because they just don't give a rap. They're innovators. They're very much self-absorbed. However, that doesn't help us. What we need is the second group, known as early adopters. And the early adopters generally take their cues from the innovators. And the early adopters, guess what? 8%, by and large. These are obviously averages, these figures, but by and large, it's an average of 8%. Those are the opinion leaders. They're out there early. As soon as they see an idea and it makes some sense to them, they start thinking, hey, that could be good for society or good for my group. And they latch on to it. They then pass it down here to, there's a lot of different names for them, but the mid-level adopters, sometimes called the salt of the earth. These are the folks who don't change their mind very often, but when they do, they stick with it, and they look to the early adopters for guidance. Then, they're sometimes called the early majority, if you want that term.
What's the percentage of those?
Beg pardon?
What's the percentage of the mid-level?
Well, these percentages down here tend to differ. These two groups together, however, are that 90% that we talked about over here.
What is the fourth called again? Sorry?
The fourth group are called, spell it here, I'll write it up here for you, the majority. These are the early majority. These are what Dickie Nixon called the silent majority. And together they're that 9 out of 10 people who don't really give a rap. They care, but they just haven't got time, whatever. These are, the ignorant and apathetic. And then a small group, but a critical group. And guess what? They are called the laggards. The laggards come in 2 varieties. There are true laggards, people who just are slow, or who on this subject just truly, they don't even care that they care. They don't even care that they don't care, I mean. So they're laggards. I live on a blueberry and a tree farm up on a dirt dead end road in New Hampshire, looking off at the mountains, that idyllic New England situation. And the guy down the road from me has dairy cows. And the great rumor around town is that about 10 years ago, he went into the local farm equipment dealer and he bought a milking machine because he was at last convinced that they were here to stay. So Jimmy bought a milking machine. He's a true laggard. But laggards also have a funny way of being innovators. based on the cyclical nature of things. I don't know if you're familiar with an organization called the Association for the Study of Cycles. They've gone back to the Spanish archives of starting in 1590, and they have charted economic cycles, fashion cycles, social cycles. It's great work. We use it all the time in our practice. That's why I'm saving all my wide ties, because according to them, they're coming back in about 2 years. They can tell you when skirts will go up, skirts will go down, and they're very, very accurate with this, because it never varies by more than a year, 6 months, or whatever. Well, laggards who just never change sometimes end up being leaders again. So that Jimmy, 10 years ago, right in the middle of the savings and loan scandal and all the bank mergers and everything, Jimmy paid for his milking machine with his bank, which was a shoebox under his bed. See, he knew already that banks were in big trouble, don't trust them. Savings and loan, you probably lose your money. Put your money in this thing. So those are laggards. But then there's a second kind of laggard. Those are called false laggards. And if you want to talk about identifying opinion leaders, they're critical. A false laggard is really just an innovator in wolf's clothing. Innovators have to be new, different, change. False laggards feel, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Don't even think about fixing it if it ain't broke. And so you can tell these people that there are certain characteristics about them. For example, they tend to be older. They may be 18, but they're older. You know that feel you get about people? They're older. They just have that kind of, been here forever feeling to them. They never praise anything. Never praise anything. False praise from them is a ringing endorsement. You know, well, we might do that. See, oh my God, what a great idea. We might do, well, we could, I suppose, or we could try that. Because they're just not in favor of change at all. I finally discovered this, of course, in my little New England town. We still have town meeting, you know, where we all get together the second Tuesday in March and decide what we're going to spend and what we're going to do the next year in town government, elect our town selectmen and so forth. And I'm one of these popular guys who's always bringing in the zoning laws and things like that everybody loves, you know. And I used to work the opinion leaders. I used to work the early adopters, and it would take the whole doggone winter to get these people lined up so I could pass this stuff. I was chairman of the planning board, you know, I had to pass these amendments. And then I discovered this theory of false laggards by reading Eva Hugh Katz very closely. And sure enough, in my town there is one. He's an old farmer. I don't know how old. His name's Danny Harvey. He must be 70 now. He's a great, big, tall, skinny Yankee. His family came to my little town in 1640. Has lived in the same farm ever since. See, so he meets all the criteria. In fact, when you look at Danny, I've always had this secret feeling that it was Danny that came in 1640. Yeah, exactly. He's been recycled, and he has that kind of 1640s feel about him, you know. And I mean, so here's what'll happen. Here's how I learned this. At town meeting, you know, we would spend maybe an hour debating whether to spend $50,000 to fix up the fire truck. And since none of us know anything about fire trucks, we can all talk our heads off about this for an hour, you see. And pretty soon Danny will stand up. As soon as he stands up, everybody else is quiet. And he says, Madam Moderator, see, we're a modern town, we have a woman moderator. Madam Moderator, you know, we've been debating this for about an hour, or usually he'd say, they're very precise. We've been debating this for an hour and 3 minutes and 22 seconds, and it kind of dawned on me that if we were to spend the money, it wouldn't bankrupt the town. And he sits down. Well, I mean, everybody knows what just happened. The moderator just bangs the gavel, calls for a show of hands, everybody votes yes. If Danny Harvey said it wouldn't bankrupt the town, it's the best idea on the whole agenda. Get with it, vote for it. You see, well, now think about the populations you work in. Think about even your employee population. There are always these false laggards. See, other people get enthusiastic and they praise things. And, oh, what a great idea. And so that, you know, others kind of, I'm not too sure. But these false laggards, they're always just so, well, you know, gosh. If you can ever win them over, They are just absolute gems. And so when we look for opinion leaders, we're looking for early adopters, and if we're lucky enough to be able to find them, for false language. That's where you find opinion leaders in the diffusion process. And you can see this in all kinds of ways. You can see it in Congress. There are 2 or 3 false languages in Congress. When they finally come around to it, I mean, it just goes zoom. There's no more debate. It's over. And so that's what we know about the social setting of all of this. And that's what you need to know about being able to put all this together into a program. Any questions? I gave you, I gave you sort of a master's degree here in 2-3 hours. Well, that's right. If you were taking a master's degree course in this is what you would be studying in far more detail, of course, and doing some research around it and so forth. But this is pretty much it. Today, the goal is to go direct to people to build personal relationships, because that's how you break through the clutter. That's how you overcome the gatekeepers, you see. You know, if you do that, pretty soon your key stakeholders, when they know they can get the word from the horse's mouth, they stop paying attention to a lot of this other stuff. You know, sure, the media will do their thing, the politicians will do their thing, the activists will do their thing, and people may listen to this, but usually it's in one ear and out the other. Because if I know I can call you up and say, okay, I've heard all this crap, what's really going on? And you can say, well, let me tell you what's happening in here. You know, what am I going to believe? Because I've got a relationship with you, I've got some trust in you. I know that these other 3 groups have their own self-serving agendas. But you got to do it through relationships, and they have to at least start as personalized relationships, because it's the only way you can break through the clutter to find them. And they're going to make decisions based on that. So if we can find the opinion leaders, they will diffuse the discussion, the debate, our opinion. The flip side of this is, think of this. Well, everything I presented to you, this is basic sociology and psychology. It's happening anyway. The question for us is whether we want to participate, or do we want these decisions made? We're sitting over here, and the people making the decision are over here. Well, obviously, we want to be in that group. So that means you've got to find the opinion leaders, you've got to find their networks, you got to get into them, and you got to engage in the debate. Now, I want to just talk for a minute about engaging in the debate. I said I wouldn't preach to you yet, so I'll make this non-preachy, but the other thing that bugs me is that you guys and gals don't even look around Capitol Hill and see how other agencies do it. You really believe, and I know you've been ordered to do this, but who the hell ever pays attention to orders? This is the 21st century. You've been told to be neutral about Social Security. Every time I meet somebody from Ford, they're very neutral. They say, well, you know, our cars are kind of similar to GM's cars and Honda's cars. I mean, that's all. But just look on Capitol Hill. Look at DOD. Now, there's a neutral group. They just take a neutral position on the defense budget every year. Well, give us whatever you think we ought to have, you know. I mean, get real. I happen to be chairman of the Public Affairs Advisory Board to the Department of Defense. If we need it, do you know how many lobbyists we can unleash on Capitol Hill at any time? Would you believe 20,000? In 1 hour, I can get emails and phone calls from all over the world, from as many as maybe 100,000 opinion leaders into Congress. Do you think that's why they got $5 billion last year that the Joint Chiefs of Staff didn't know what the hell to do with? They didn't want it. Remember, they said to Congress, don't give us that $5 billion. We can't spend it this year. Oh, what the hell? Here's another, what's another 5? You know, take this $5 billion. Here's another 5. Take this $5 billion. Yes, we have to be balanced and straightforward with the people we deal with. But if you go out and are saying, well, I don't know, everybody else ought to decide, be careful what they decide. You may not like it. Furthermore, I don't care what Congress says. Why did we repeal the Hatch Act? Not just because it was unconstitutional, but also because who knows better how to get into the debate than the people who are doing it every day? And so if you don't take part, then we miss the basic source of expertise. You're the ones who can tell us what the real problems are, not what some politician thinks or somebody sitting way up in an exalted position here in the agency, but people on the front line. Now, you got to do this tactfully. Obviously, you can't be picketing and ranting about this. But if you truly, if Social Security takes a position, well, you know, whatever you want to decide, I'm sorry, it's idiocy. It is just idiocy. And it is not at all certainly what the framers of the Constitution had in mind when they talked about government. Read old history. I mean, you know, all the people who were in appointed offices jumped out and said what they had to say. Don't worry about it. Trust the American people to get the information and to make the decision. But they deserve every knowledgeable voice that they can hear. Presented, of course, in order to be effective, in a tactful way. And it's always a good idea, if you know anything about psychology, to say, well, this is how most of us who've been working there a long time and we see the results feel. Some other people feel we should do this and this and this. And you know, there may be some value in that, but we don't think those are great ideas for certain reasons. You can give the reasons. You know, you're just having a rational discussion. But to just stand back from it and say, oh, my mouth is sealed, I would urge you to rethink that. Because if we all do that, well, we may not like the results. Let me give you a couple more handouts before it's time for lunch. You can go over there and have one of those superlative lunches. I already made one horrible mistake, and I gave you early the first page of diffusion process. That's why none of you were taking notes, I know. Here's the second page, which is about the different types, the speed with which people make decisions. Let me just remind you again, it's not a stereotype. I mean, you know, I'm not saying these people are lagging. The same person who's a laggard on one subject may be an absolute innovator or an opinion leader on another subject. And again, that goes back to the circle here, you see. I may be an early adopter here, whereas I'm an absolute laggard over here because I don't give a rap about that subject. Any questions or comments? Yes, ma'am.
Did Dan Hogarth ever buy into your ideas?
I'm sorry, what?
Was it Dan Hogarth? Did he ever buy into your ideas? Danny?
Well, I don't think I'll say who didn't.
Come on.
Okay.
Well, let me say this. Let me say this. The last time I was with the senior leaders in Baltimore, in that boring windowless conference room off the first floor.
We've been there.
Yeah, you've been there, I know. Everybody was in sync, with one exception. And I will tell you that was former Congressman Keneally. Is she still hanging around as an advisor? Barbara Keneally, a congressperson from Connecticut who was defeated and was given a job as an advisor. And she just couldn't get out of her mind that the media didn't make all the decisions. The media were the voice to the American people. Clearly they represented the thoughts of all Americans, and that whatever they said should go. But she agreed with everything else. She disagreed with that, but she still said, let's get out and build those relationships, let's do all the rest of it. So I think, look, having an organization is like, how many, what is it, 65,000 people? You know, getting 65,000 people singing off the same sheet does not happen overnight, particularly when you have a culture of not doing that. But what can I tell you? In July, we're doing a 10-day session with a whole group of public affairs. Some of you may be in that group, I don't know. The senior public affairs leadership and then the new communications council around the country. We'll be here for 10 days. I'll do the whole 10 days of that, doing a plan. You know, this stuff, I don't come cheap, I'll tell you. And so, you know, somebody believes in this. So yeah, I think we have, the goal is this. Just think for a minute, just envision this, dream this. Every office of the Social Security system around this country has a real relationship building, communication network going in their community. I mean, would anybody dare attack the system? That's why DOD doesn't get attacked. Starting right after the Second World War, every year we take a few thousand opinion leaders away for a weekend or a week. We identify them, we put them out on an aircraft carrier, shoot them off a plane, from the catapult. We put them on a submarine, we put them in a tank, we